Hello and good evening, everybody, and welcome to Vision Seeds, a light-hearted deep dive journey of visionary cultures in our Extinction Rebellion and beyond, hosted by Sarah Zoltash tonight, and I'll hand you straight over.
Good evening, Extinction Rebellion. This is Vision Seeds with your slightly mad but absolutely adorable host, Sarah Zoltash, in a week where the actual Pentagon has released footage of UFO sightings. And we just found out that a meteor is about to pass by Earth, narrowly miss a collision with our beautiful planet by less than the hair of a bus route's width. And our leaders in this time of global crisis are offering us new resonances for the words bell and end. I have been out searching for visions that can bring us back down to earth, bring us back down to the land, bring us back down to community, to our bodies, to our feelings, and to some intimate sense of real connectedness with what's actually happening here. Those visions tonight are going to come from Martin Wieniecki and Vera Klein-Hammers from Tamara Healing Biotope in Portugal. I'm really excited to have them on tonight. They're going to be telling us all about the ways that their community formed, their community built trust, and what lessons they may be able to offer up to this moment and to our movement. And also we've got Rebel David Morgan here tonight, who can share with us one of his ideas. He contacted me after the show last week, after seeing the show last week, and I loved what he was talking about. So we've got him on tonight. If you have any ideas that you want to share on this show or with me, I work in a part of the movement called vision sensing. Here we are, sensing your vision, sensing your vision. If you would like to come here and share your vision, please write in the comments. Or if you're having some visions right now and you just want to pour them out, write in the comments, let us know. I'm going to be checking those all night for the next hour until 9 o'clock. So earlier on this week, I was reading Satish Kumar, an incredible environmental visionary, a real elder of the work that we're doing here. He wrote a blog post for Advaya Initiative. Advaya's, one of Advaya's founders, Christabel Reed's a rebel, and she's going to be on next week talking about what Advaya are doing to contribute to this great paradigm shift that we're in. Satish was talking about how the word quarantine is also was originally from the term for the 40 days that Jesus went into the desert. And I got thinking about how each of us are being tempted by our own devils to behave in ways that like go against what we know is right, or how each of us are passing through these passages, these chthonic passages. Have you heard that word? Chthonic. Chthonic. It's all just coming out of that underworld chthonically. And we've got also Ramadan happening at the moment. I'm observing Ramadan right now. We're going to be passing out of Ramadan. We're going to have iftar tonight at like about 22 minutes past 8. And people are fasting all over the world until mid-May, late May, when by that time Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, and Pluto will all be in retrograde. But we don't talk about astrology at XR. Shh, we don't talk about astrology. Stars are nature too, but we don't talk about astrology. Anyway, all of that's going to be happening in just the next few weeks. The level of transformation, our great walk through these shadow valleys, if it's a shadow valley for you, this desert, this realization, this reckoning, it's all unfolding right now. Maybe there's something being unearthed for you. Maybe there's something coming up for you right now. I want you to write it. Let us know. Let us know in the comments. Just before we hear from David Morgan, our rebel who's got a beautiful vision, I just invite you to find yourself a space, center yourself in your breath, and hear this vision reminder that is offered from XR UK's Vision Sensing out to the movement and beyond. Let us take a moment to consider why we are here. Let's recall our love for the whole of humanity in all corners of the world. Let's remember our love for this beautiful planet that feeds, nourishes, and sustains all life. Let's recollect our sincere desire to protect all of this, for now and for the generations to come. We act today, this week, this time, all time. May we find the courage to bring this sense of peace and cooperation and appreciation and collaboration with everyone we encounter, to every word we speak, and every action we make. This is an emergency. And we're here and we're together and we're rooted in love. We are all we need. We are all we need. I believe that. David Morgan, are you there?
Hi, Sarah.
Yes, you are. So there's a piece of your vision that I think we need. Will you share it with us now?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Sarah. Well, really, thanks for having me. And astrology, Pluto, don't get me started. So I'll just go into the vision full flow. So what it is, or what it attempts to do, firstly, is to try and create a new model for how we, as a culture, go about living our daily life in a way that nature would have intended. And in order to do that, of eco-glamping communities. These would be connected digitally, and being a software developer, I see no reasons why we wouldn't create our very own social media platform. These communities would run on renewable energies, ideally aiming for a carbon zero footprint. Each of them having their own circular economy by utilizing permaculture for self-sustainability. I'm under no illusions that the industrial age has left much devastation in its wake. I'm sure all of us are aware of that. But that doesn't mean that technology has been the cause of it. In fact, I believe that technology, computers are the greatest assets that have actually come from the industrial age. And, you know, as we start to undo the damage that has been done, I don't think we should cast out the very thing that we have spent the past 200 years of effort manifesting. You know, the golden age will be the digital age.
I really hear you on that. And I think that is such an important reframing. If we're trying to say that this world is sacred, our lives are sacred, then this thing that has come about that we've really literally mined from the center of the earth, if it can help us and support us to be able to come back into balance, then let us at least make the most of that, and find a way to come back into balance. If people want to talk to you about this idea, what can they do?
So yeah, if you feel called to this vision, please don't be shy. I've got a Facebook page and a group, both under the name of Essene UK. That's ESSENE UK. So if you think you'd be an effective team member or someone who could lead the way, has the right connections, or, you know, even if the vision just really resonates with you, please give us a like and we will do our best to get in contact with you. And we really look forward to working with you all, you know. Bless the planet. Aho.
Great. Thanks. Aho. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate that. So Essene, you heard that. We're going to have a comment in all of the different platforms that this being streamed on with David. He'll share the links in there. And is it true, David, that you once shared the business plan for this with Russell Brand?
I did, yeah. I purposely went to his show Rebirth, and at the end of the show, I went up there, waved my business plan around. He took it, but not to much avail. So, you know, but you know, persistence. This vision will come about, I'm sure.
I'm sure it will. You never know when the seeds are ready to sprout, and you don't know what got planted in his mind. Thank you so much, David. It's really great to hear your vision. You know, some of the things that I'm hearing from rebels like David are things that just a few years ago, really, it was such a minority of people that were advocating for these incredible solutions to the crisis that we find ourselves in. In fact, the very crises themselves, the fact that there are these intersecting crises and were things that up until, you know, less than a year ago, well, about a year ago, actually, it's almost a year ago, isn't it, that were taboo. You couldn't talk about them. If you tried to bring them up in front of people who didn't really know about them, they'd be like, well, these people are bonkers. They are whatever. It's nice. It's warm. I like it. It's more sunny. It's like, what? And actually, when you look at how rapidly a taboo can be opened up and opened out for the service of all people, you see that it's our job in some ways to go into that Plutonian chthonic underworld and dig out some of those taboos and bring them up and out into the surface. Like we can see at the moment that the crisis that we're in is bringing us to a place where we can talk about things like the fact that there's going to be a mass famine. You know, let that land with you. Like, what we're talking about the house being on fire. So how do we react? What do we do when like 240 million of our family members are going to be facing a famine? That's a taboo, right? Is that something you're bringing up in your Excel humor thread circle? I don't know if it is, right? It's not funny. That's the point. It's not funny. And the mass culling of farm animals, it's not funny, you know? How do we talk about things that are taboo? How do we bring them up to the surface in a way that means we actually can deal with them and speak about them and move through them and mend ourselves? This taboo, these ideas about taboos is what this little segment here now in Vision Seeds is all about. You write in any taboos that you want me to talk about. I'm going to be checking the comments in a little minute to see what you've been saying. But if there are taboos that you're experiencing in your communities that are preventing you from being able to address the real struggle, the real challenge that's out there, I want to hear about it. And then we can find ways to open that story up. One taboo that certainly exists in the culture that I exist in now here in Berkshire, and also the culture that my ancestors are from in the Middle East, and certainly within XR, and certainly within around intimacy, around gender, around what it means when gender and sexuality come together. Even me talking about this now, I bet a bunch of you are like, hang on a minute, I thought she was going to talk about the planet. Yeah, that, when you feel that, like, that is a taboo. But really, when we look at this moment that we're in now, think about how much people are suffering from the lack of human contact, the lack of human touch, not knowing how to go after it, not knowing what the right way to bring it into our lives is something that causes great pain for us, not just when we're in quarantine or when we're in lockdown, but throughout our lives. Think about all of the times when you have longed to be held. Think about all the times when you've gone through a difficult part of life, a difficult moment, a difficult incident or accident or encounter or event. And the difference it would have made if you could have been held through that, if you could have felt human touch, if someone could have just held your hand, put their arm around you. And then also, when you think about all of the struggles that come about through the imbalances of power that play out in different sexual roles, in different like gender roles. I mean, we know a bit more about gender roles, don't we? We've had Me Too, we've had feminism rolling out for the last century or more. Like we know a bit more about that. But actually, like what happens when we don't speak to the human need for physical contact? That we have things when we don't speak to that need. Instead, what we have at one end is we have things like the incel movement, the involuntary celibate movement, who are so angry at the fact that they've been made involuntarily celibate, that they've become hateful towards themselves and other people. It generates hate there. And then on the other side, you have people being exploited for their bodies, because that's the only way that somebody knows how to get physical contact is, by exploiting somebody. It's just like madness. What happens if we just bring that together and we say, hey, this is also a frontier of our healing? Yes, the planet needs our love, because we need to listen to the planet. How can I listen to this sacred earth if I do not listen to my sacred body? That my body is part of this earth. We are nature protecting ourselves, right? So we have to listen to ourselves and our needs, our physical needs, as much as we listen to the planet's needs, if we are to move our way through what we're experiencing right now. These ideas around sexual intimacy, sacred intimacy, the body is a sacred site, something to be honored, just as a beautiful church building or an incredible beach or mountain would be, are ideas that actually I found quite uncomfortable when I was first looking into them. But I do believe in defending the sacred. I do believe in that. That's a snazzy little segue into talking about Defend the Sacred. Defend the Sacred is a annual, I believe, conference that happens at Tamera, the Healing Biotope, that Martin and Vera are now going to come on and talk to me a little bit about. I first heard about Defend the Sacred a few years ago when I was really turning my creativity and my sacred practices to the work of defending our shared planet. So Martin, please, and Vera, welcome.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, nice to see you. Welcome. So please will you tell us a bit about Defend the Sacred and Tamera, the project that you steward and live on right now?
Yeah, hello everyone. So we join you from southern Portugal, from a international community and a peace research and education center called Tamara, which actually is a very old word for being at the original source. And Tamara is a project that is is a community project that originally started in Germany and is reaching back 40 years of social experimentation, also of ecological work. And we call this project here in Portugal a healing biotope. So we are working on a vision of actually modeling on a small scale what a post-capitalist and regenerative and non-violent way of culture would actually look like. So a healing biotope would be a form of life where the relation between people, but also the relation between people and the natural world would really be based on trust and cooperation, because we believe that, and yeah, beautifully, as you just spoke about the relation between our bodies and the natural world, that the crises that we are seeing right now in the world, they are really interrelated. Like, it is hard to actually separate the climate crisis from the crisis of relation between people, which causes them into consumerist and abusive relation to one another. The kind of frustration in love and sexuality is being passed on to the abuse of our planet, and so on and so forth and so forth. So you cannot really separate one from the others. So if you want to really replace this dominant system that you have, we believe one of the strongest ways of doing that is actually come up with a new system that will make the old one obsolete, as Buckminster Fuller once put it.
I think it's so beautiful what you're sharing, and I'm feeling the landing of that realization again, even though I've been in this place before, wow, it really will require healing at that level, at that interpersonal bodily level. And we're going to be digging into that and digging into the ways that you've been working with that at Tamara. But can you just say a little bit? I'm curious, because you seem to be addressing, exactly what's unfolding right now, but you've obviously been there for some time. Like, when did you guys get set up? What was the political context when Tamara was founded?
So the project actually came as a result from a very political movement. Dieter Doom, who's one of the founders, he was very active in the '68 movement in the time when there was lots of movement against the war in Vietnam. So he was very politically active in Germany, also wrote many books and was one of the student leaders in the '68 movement. And then at some point he realized to go to the street and demonstrate against a war happening somewhere and going back to a system where almost every little piece of that system makes wars necessary to function, has wars as a base somehow, like economically and all the aspects where in our daily behavior we perpetuate a system that needs wars. So then that brought him to a point of really deeply saying, wow, I have to rethink all my political motivation. And then he started to see that what Martin also said, like there is no, like all the systems that are nowadays creating global collapse are human made. So we have to heal the inner of the human in order to also create naturally a healthy world, a healthy society again. And that led then very much into the interhuman research and how do we as humans regain trust to ourselves, to the nature we live in, how do we re-establish that ability of deep interconnectedness with life, which actually is our nature, but which we have totally alienated from. And so in that sense then very much like questions of like, how do we really build trust among humans? How do we create a society where suppression, abuse, all these things are impossible? Because the foundation is, again, trust, transparency, cooperation, respect.
Wow, that's so beautiful, where that violence to each other is just impossible.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot in XR at the moment about how do we make the impossible possible? And you've really just spoken it there, that like the way that we make the impossible possible is by making that violence impossible through trust, through connection, through understanding. And so I just want to, before we kind of start to think a bit more about how the work that you're doing relates to XR, I want to just get a sense of like, what does it look like? Because it sounds great. And I'm like, when do I get to visit? But then I'm like, what's the landscape like? Are you by the sea? Is it, what does it look like there? Paint a picture for our viewers.
Looks like a hell lot of work. No. I mean, the landscape, it's not at the ocean, but it's like 30 kilometers from the ocean on the countryside. It's a very desertified area, overgrazed, like very dry area. And the place, we are in Portugal, we are now living here since about 20 years. The community started in Portugal 20 years ago. It's called the Alentejo. It's one of the least populated areas of Europe, actually. There's less and less younger people in the villages, and lots of cork oaks, rock roses, like little hilly, very beautiful, like how do you say, lieblich also.
A lovely landscape.
Lovely landscape, but very dry. Like it needs a lot of attention to actually be able to come into its natural form again.
Yeah, there's definitely a poetry there in that kind of like the dryness of human connection, of the kind of brittleness of the feeling that I know that for me was like really quite normal until I started to hear about places like Tamera. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I want to hear, so okay, we're talking about, actually maybe I will drop in, like, so when I first heard about you, which was a few years ago, I understood immediately, like on a this level and also on a this level, the truth of what you were saying. You know, how could we ever think about healing this if I wasn't prepared to heal this and all the stuff that happens and heal that as well, you know. Like that was so essentially part of it. Coming from a Middle Eastern background, I really understand how so many of the social suffering is because of the division and oppression of the sexes upon one another. And at the same time, I was like, no, mate, that sounds hard. Of all of the things that I could have tried to do, like, you know, like maybe go on a march or like, I don't know, tie myself to a tree or like various different things to try to stop the destruction of the planet. Wow, going inside and thinking about myself and like thinking about especially sexuality, like this great taboo in all of our societies, it felt like just such a huge leap. And I do feel like I've made some progress. You know, I'm making some progress, but I would love to hear you speaking about the ways that you think the work that you're doing at Tamera relates to what XR needs in this time.
Yeah. Well, I think that I mean, there is this kind of slogan or this principle of power that we know since the Roman Empire, which is divide and rule. And when you look back at the history of many social movements, you see how insidiously this principle has been used by state power and by corporations to actually apply it to social movements. And oftentimes there have been very strong social movements, and they were exploited at the point where the trust between people wasn't strong enough. And so the movement could be broken apart from a power that came in externally. So there is this strong leftist slogan that the people united will never be defeated. And I believe this is very deeply true. But if the people can actually not trust each other because their relations are shadowed by things like competition, by anger, by jealousy, by struggles around sex, power, money, it is hard to kind of maintain unity on a purely ideological level, or by, well, oftentimes then people create unity by having a shared enemy that we fight. And I think this is also necessary, and I also don't want to condemn it, but I think there is a real opportunity here of collaboration between social movements that are absolutely necessary. And deeply, deeply grateful for the civil disobedience that XR is, doing against this corrupt and ecocidal system. And I think there is a real opportunity here of bridging this work with the work of communities that are working on an interpersonal foundation that can give substance to the need for unity in this time. And this a lot has to do with, like, how do you create trust? Well, we need spaces where people can actually become truthful with one another again, like where we don't have to kind of pretend to be someone else in order to be accepted, like where we don't have to wear masks and where we don't have to conceal which is actually true inside ourselves in order to be kind of socially functional.
Yes, yeah, I totally hear you, that we do need these spaces where we can come back again to what it feels like to be a trusting human. I know that I've heard about this collaboration that XR has set up between themselves and Tamara through Stu Basden, one of the founders of Extinction Rebellion, whose real work is like deeply to seed and bed in the regenerative cultures of XR. And Stu and Hannah from XR Germany, who was on the show last week, came to visit you in Tamara last summer. They came to defend the sacred, I believe. And they were I think they were kind of like, especially Hannah was like kind of looking for different models, different ways that the community could organize. And I wonder, maybe you can tell us a little bit, like, how do you think, like, how did that conversation unfold to be able to come to a point of collaboration? What is it that you saw, in this, like, belief that, like, the people united can never be defeated? I 100% back that. How did that start to weave together?
Yeah, well, I think it's we are starting to explore, like, what would be mechanisms and pathways, platforms, educational offers where we can actually support the creation of community, and also to raise consciousness really about how do we establish trust building processes. Because you could also say, yeah, it's easy for you to talk because you live in a community, and so, like, you have the spaces and the rituals and all of this to do this kind of work. But actually community is everywhere. Like, community is latently everywhere where people get together. It's just actually the question, are we in that mindset, or are we considering ourselves like isolated selves, kind of more or less struggling against other people? So we have looked into that, and actually one idea that we came up with, or it was more than an idea, it was actually a plan that we had, was to produce a summer retreat for 60 rebels from around the world this year in Tamara, which unfortunately with the COVID-19 situation we needed to cancel or postpone for the time being. So this is actually the first opportunity to kind of reach out to more people in XR and make this connection. And yeah, we will continue to find ways. Online education will definitely be a pathway. So
I'm curious, say if they had gathered, I hope that at some point you will do that. And so I don't want to give too much of the bag, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much, but I'm curious, like, yeah, community is everywhere, but you do have something very precious going on at Tamara. What kind of ways do you hold each other? Like, we see ceremony in XR, we had the candle ceremony last week. I know that some viewers will have their own ways of holding ritual in their communities, and we all have these kind of like bigger rituals in the UK at the moment. People get out at 8 p.m. on a Thursday night and smash pots and pans outside their door to thank the care workers. Like, what can you, what kind of practices, what kind of things do you actually have going on there that you could just give us a little glimpse into?
They're very different things, but I think one very essential part is the field the place carries by itself. And that is, like, we are not at all a healing biotope yet. And still, like, there are so many places, things that remind you to the comprehensive system change and the approach of really building a life that reconnects you with the cycles, like the water retention landscape we are building. Like, for me, I often realize nowadays it's so rare to be walking a landscape which actually regenerates by humans living with it rather than decreases. And these kind of details, even though they might not all be consciously noticed, they do something to the system because we are much more connected than we often are aware of.
Wow, that's
and then there are other like community, like ways we come together as community, where we're just trying to build the consciousness of remembering that we are part of a much bigger family and a much bigger evolutionary process. Because one of the problems really, or one of the illnesses of this time, is really this disconnection from life. And here, like, may it be that you eat the food that comes from the garden. And also what I think is very essential, that we have ways, one way is, for example, we call it forum, where we have a platform where you are allowed to really, like, the attempt is really to reveal what is going on inside of you. And also to get mirrors for how do people perceive you. And I think this is also something very rare for us in society. Like Martin spoke, very often we have to build, like, show something to the outside, and what's actually going inside usually has to be disguised or hidden because it doesn't fit into the norms, like and dare to really allow people to deeply look inside of you and actually mirror, like, feedback, because the whole world, like the natural systems, they function because there is constant truthful feedback. If the heart doesn't feel well, it can't hide it. And if we create again a human society where we really know what do we think about each other, then also this builds a totally different substance of knowing, and like getting rid of the constant fear of what do people think about me, if actually they would know what's going on inside of me. Like one of the guiding sentences that we have is, a person that really feels seen and accepted for who they are would never turn violent. And this is such a deep core thought of the healing work we do, or the social work we do.
Yeah, it says so much, doesn't it? That, again, coming back to that sense of how it becomes impossible to harm one another when we ground ourselves in that trust. And as you were talking, it really struck me that that type of trust is almost so absent as to not be recognized as trust. The trust to, like, trust myself that when I say a thing, it's just going to come out as me, you know, like, and then also the trust, I feel like I understand a bit more about, like, the trust of, like, have to be careful about what I say because it might get misinterpreted. That almost feels like that is the norm, you know. The norm is that I need to be careful about what I say because it's going to be misinterpreted. So I have to, like, present things in a way that this person's going to listen to, this person's going to understand. And I can imagine it, being so healing to just be able to reveal, and that revealing of my heart also be met with understanding, you know, really clear. And when you said about, I often talk about sort of with myself, with God, I talk about authenticity, and I say how, like, the birds just sing, you know. They're not there going like, oh, I'm not sure, does it sound good? Is this what you want to hear? They're just there, you know, singing away. And I wonder also, like, do they ever wonder if like, does this tree trust me? Like, I wonder if the sun's going to take me seriously when I do this song at dawn. It's like you start to think about all of these things that we've brought in to manage our interactions. You start to see how there are really so many tears and cracks in the human trust, in that sort of that goop that holds us together. There are so many holes, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I went off on one then, but yeah, please just pick that up wherever you like. I know that this idea of trust is so important in XR at the moment, and I just know that I keep coming back to it. It was my prayer for this new moon, and anything you want to let's share, please.
Yeah, well, I think there's also this point about acceptance, because there is, like, if you live in a way where you in a way have to, like, disguise what you truly feel and think, then and then interact on a polite level where there is, like, this kind of superficial acceptance, on the inner, you know that it's actually not really true. And so there is always this kind of like you walk constantly on thin ice, and there is this other feeling of acceptance, like, and it's not that it's that we are constantly like, oh, it's, you know, like we just like be constantly super nice with each other. Like it's also sometimes really challenging, you know, like, because learning feedback also means that you have to learn to express the things that are not pleasant, or the behaviors that are really annoying in other people, or even, you know, where like you have to tell the other person, actually you lied in this bit, or, you know, like, and so it is also about learning to become really quite direct, and fierce even sometimes with each other. But there is still a different form of acceptance that kind of develops as a foundation for the interpersonal kind of interconnection, when you know that what the others tell you, you can trust that this is the truth, and that there is no judgment in that, you know, even in a tough feedback that you get from someone. And that for me is also part of trust, because we can imagine it to be really like airy-fairy and super nice all the time, but actually it is a different foundation where we can actually say stuff to one another. And so I just want to say that, and also that I mean, it sounds really nice, and it is work, and it also requires a deep commitment of people to kind of to go into it. And it's not like a weekend workshop, you know, like, of course it's nice to have retreats and workshops, but it's actually an ongoing commitment for this kind of work with each other and being in relation.
Yes, I really hear you, that it's like, it can't just be like that old way of just turning up to church on Sunday, you know, just doing prayers at a certain time of day. It's like, no, if we're working with the body, we're working with life. That's every day, you know. There's a commitment in there that's like a deep and embodied commitment. I want to just cycle back a little bit to Vera, what you said about that when somebody is truly seen or accepted, sorry if that's not the exact phrase, but something about how it's impossible for them to do violence. I wonder, can you say how you came to that, and where you see that in the work that you do at Tamera, and how you see that unfolding in the rest of the world? I think it's something that when we talk about nonviolence in XR, it's often in thinking about nonviolent civil disobedience, a little bit of stuff about nonviolent communication, which I'm not sure everyone knows loads about, but check it out. It's a really important way of just talking with each other. But it'd be great to hear from you any experiences you have of like actually really seeing this change in people, that all the ways that they might enact some violence, it becomes impossible for them to do that.
I mean, one thing I thought, for example, very often if like there is a conflict, almost always you can track it down to an actual longing to be seen and accepted. And I mean, that's somewhat also what one sees playing out globally, yeah? I mean, sometimes there's a saying like, it's little boys, patriarchy, yeah? And what we are trying to do, and this is an experience we very often do, because we have like the society we have built in the Western culture is so much about, I would say, like pretending something, like an outer facade that you try to keep up, and a certain beauty image that you have to fit in, and a certain school image that you have to fit in. Like it's all this outer, trying to match an outer image of how you should be, how life should be. And all the inner questions, they don't have a place. And very often, like we have the experience that in these forum spaces, if people dare to also show their shit somehow in an authentic, undisguised way, it always creates the fact of love, and of like seeing each other always creates love. If life perceives life, there's always the magic of curiosity at least happening. Like I think everybody can connect to this moment. If you really have a moment of perceiving another being, a flower, a tree, there's immediately love and no judgment. The judgment is only in the space before. If we if we connect in the space where we don't actually show what's going on. And this is such a revelation of how life actually functions if we come to that deeper level of perceiving each other. And I think that's a very essential part. Like Martin said, then there is the space of where you don't judge each other, even if it's rough. And one saying we also have is you can do what you want if you know what you do. Because of course there are moments where I'm full of judgment of other people because I really think they really didn't understand me and really like whatever it is. But also this, I can bring it and say, and I know, like I'm totally triggered now, but I don't like give a polite feedback in this like smoochy voice, but underneath something totally different is going on.
Yeah.
And this is what we mean, like where, yeah, to come again to the level where we really connect with life and its powers. And this is also I think we as humanity, we have alienated so much from life that we don't trust the life forces itself anymore, and we don't trust ourselves anymore. And from this comes this need to control and domesticate everything. But in nature, again, nature is an example, like the cycles, they work so perfectly. There is no trash, for example. And if we again come to this deeper layer of trusting the powers of life, then I know even an angry feeling, maybe if I bring it in the right way, underneath there is a constructive impulse if I track it down to its very origin. So how do we come again to this where we are able to confront the powers of life in their fullness and don't have to domesticate and control everything, but come to this deeper trust? And this again then comes to this holistic model we are creating, because it's then not only the social realm, but it's also how do I regain as a human my trust to the bigger cycles that this planet is part of, that nature is part of. Yeah, so it's like all a comprehensive work of reconnecting.
Yeah, I love it so much. We're going to come back to speaking more about that holistic model in a second. And I just want to keep inviting our viewers to like think of this as a place for our inner questions. There's all sorts of places that we can go and ask the questions about, like, you know, when's the next rebellion? Where's you getting your mask from? How's your family? But where do we get to ask our inner questions? Let's read out some of the comments that have been pouring in. We've got we are building new friendships of like-minded people who are either rebels or gardeners and conservationists, or just interested. That's nice. That's from Lemmy Mitchell, speaking on Facebook. We also have Lemmy Mitchell talking, they're singing, they're having Celtic ceremonies, a worship in nature. I think more and more people are coming back to the land in those ways. People calling, you know, that we need to stop spraying chemicals, you know, that people who are like expressing that first love for the nature that's there. And often that's the awakening, isn't it? The nature out there. Someone here has written, as crazy and divided, microphone's just gone. Hello. As crazy and divided as people are, it's a good thing. Otherwise the world would be boring as hell if everyone was the same. Lol. That's from Sheeple Are Lame on YouTube. Great name, Sheeple Are Lame on YouTube. Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like with us being all divided and whatnot, it kind of created hell. And I don't know about you, but apart from just being frightening, it's not particularly interesting. Like, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but I'd say it's like boring and scary rather than like fascinating and good. But hey, that's me, Sheeple. I'm not Sheeple, you're Sheeple. You think, anyway, whatever. But yeah, just coming back to some of that, what you were talking about, I'm really just encouraging our viewers to, you know, tell us what this is doing to you. What are you hearing in this? Like, just anything that's popping up for you. I know I'm making notes, like I've written down a bunch of things like constant truthful feedback. That's one of the things that I'm listening to the birds outside, and it's just allowing that to sink in. But also I want to come back to, you said something about the fact of love, recognizing love, or that when life recognizes itself, you cannot help but there be the fact of love. That was it. When life recognizes life, they cannot help but be the fact of love, or at least curiosity. And I just thought that's so beautiful. I know, Martin, you've done some thinking around the kind of quantum moment that we're in now with the corona crisis. And I wonder how that how that, you know, how that makes sense for you, this life recognizing love producing, recognizing life producing love, and like on the quantum level, what do you think that that's doing? Just to drop you in that.
Yeah, well, how many hours have we got for this?
We got a bit of time. Drop us in at the deep end, but and we'll see where we get to.
Yeah, well, it's a very, I actually appreciate you making this connection between the perception and the love that it creates, and the kind of the moment with Corona, because in a way there you can really study on a, let's say, on a mass psychology level. We can so much at the moment observe this phenomenon of how kind of fear creates resonance, and how that is, I mean, one thing is a virus spreading, and the other is like the resonance that people create, and the kind of reality that it puts us into, all the way to the dangers of totalitarianism that is being exploited. So actually, when we are talking about like what kind of inner mode are we following, you know, are we actually sustaining a reality of trust and solidarity between one another, or one of fear and mistrust? It is actually a very it is a question that actually has a big impact to the kind of world that we are creating. And I guess this also links to the quantum piece. I'm not sure this is exactly the answer you wanted, but I think there is this realization coming through from spiritual traditions, but also from like modern science, that our observation, our consciousness is not just passively kind of making sense of the world, but that our consciousness and our observation also has this creative power. So I would say this inner choice of how we are seeing world. Are we perceiving, or are we just putting our projection of fear out there? Is really crucial, because
It's so crucial. Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
you're gone.
No, I would just say that at the moment I feel like, in a way, the Corona crisis kind of accelerates a lot of the tendencies that we've previously seen already. Like it brings a lot of the stuff out that's been wiped under the carpet previously. It accelerates the kind of collapse of the financial systems, all of that. And in this moment, I feel something of the dreamlike character of the world just becomes much stronger. Like there is a certain surreal character to all of this. But I think there is, of course, it can make us feel strange and turn away from the world. But there's also this thing of where we can say, this is a dream. I'm dreaming. And so like the way how I relate to this is actually really important to what kind of reality, like to what reality is going to unfold. So I feel this is, there is a deeper level that wants to be seen.
Yeah, it's really, I absolutely agree with you that there's a deeper level that wants to be seen, and that will be seen. Coming back to that chthonic, that's that which is underneath, you know, it's going to come up, and we have to either, like, you know, point ourselves, our visions, our what we witness in the direction of what we want to witness, or be prepared for, you know, things that are from our depths, from our underworlds, to come up and meet us if we're not prepared to do some, ask ourselves those deep questions. I know that like, you know, this, everything you're saying is really putting me in the mind of being more disciplined with myself, so that I am pointing myself in the direction of the visions that I want to come into being. And so you're here, and so I'm going to ask you, what vision do you want to come into being for XR? It's a movement that I'm super dedicated to do. I like feel like my soul is wedded into it, and I want to know, like, from that quantum level all the way through to the practical level, what can you see emerging? What can we point ourselves towards?
Well, I think that there is really, I spoke about this opportunity of a collaboration between a movement like XR and communities. And what I'm really passionate about this moment in time is this aspect of alliance building. Like you also mentioned, Defend the Sacred, and there's an alliance kind of merging in this under this banner, which like really brings together like social movements with indigenous communities and kind of futuristic communities like Tamara. And I think there is really something where if we can really see more and more strongly the vision of a truly regenerative culture, that's like where humanity is no longer kind of the nuisance that we have to protect from nature in order to preserve nature, but where actually humanity and nature are almost like in a love affair where there is the symbiotic relationship. I think there is a big strength of movements that are kind of resisting the destruction that is going on, of coming together with like creating the infrastructure of transition towards this kind of regenerative society. And so I feel like with this exploration of community, there is also a real possibility of like encouraging and in a way also incubating this transition towards a community-based culture, which I believe, I mean, the climate crisis is anyways going to force us into decentralized small-scale communities. I mean, and this is also what's very visible now with the corona crisis. Like this globalized, centralized system is just so vulnerable for this kind of crises. And I mean, the coronavirus, I mean, to be frank, it's a fart compared to the kind of disaster that is going to come with the climate crisis if we are not like taking fast action now. And even if we do, like it seems very likely that it will put us through dramatic changes, and part of that will be people rooting themselves in place again, kind of knowing where their water, their food, their energy comes from, being sure that they can trust one another, and also a transformation where we no longer create identity through, let's say, social groups, like the ideas of nationalities and religious communities and all of this, but actually, like, can we create community with the people and the beings that are around us? And so this, just looking into this future will require training different capacities than the ones we were taught in schools and universities. So I think there can be quite like, we can collaborate on kind of giving substance to this kind of vision. And I think we have to do it together. I mean, this is really the moment. This is a make or break moment for humanity.
Yes, I'm really hearing you on that. And it's so, I feel so grateful that that places like Tamara exist and have put in those decades of work that can actually share that insight that comes from lived experience with people such as David, who, you know, he has this idea and he's like, okay, we can do this, and I can use some of my skills as a software designer to be able to make this possible in places where maybe people are a bit afraid to go off into the wilds, you know, like, and actually finding a way to bridge that gap, because these community-based cultures are, I agree with you, they are what we're going towards. And I think it's going to come way quicker. It's not going to be like, oh, you know, 10, 20, it's going to be like, oh God, like, you know, it's going to suddenly arrive. And suddenly we're like, this term that was been used in the US a lot, shelter in place, you know, community in place, like, and starting to be aware of that now, starting to work towards that as soon as possible. You know, there really can be no time wasted. Time is of the essence, and the big calls to not go back to business as usual, like no more business as usual, but we do need to get down to business. That is definitely true. I know that you have a fantastic discount offer for rebels who want to get down to business and hear about how you have, is this the holistic model you were telling us about? Can you tell us a bit more about that now?
Yeah, so this online course is about the Healing Biotopes plan. So this is in a way this vision for holistic system change that we've been talking about. So like creating those community-based decentralized structures that include regeneration of nature, but also like different human relations, love and sexuality, healing of the trauma. So like this is in a way included in this approach. And we will be offering an online course from the 11th to the 31st of May on this topic. And yeah, we are inviting rebels for a special discount of 25%. And we'll be sharing information in the comments on how to learn more about this course and also how to access the discount code.
Great, thanks so much. That's like, as I understand that that's in lieu of the great gathering that you were going to have, the gathering of 60 rebels, because it's just not possible to do that this year because of COVID. Instead, you have this existing work, and you're going to make space so that rebels can come and begin to weave that work together, the work of XR and the work of Tamara together. Yeah, please, people, do check out Tamara's website, check out all their different social media platforms, have a look in the comment threads to find ways to access that discount. You really will not be disappointed. I'd say like 80% of the communities I visit, you can track the the origins of them back to Tamara in a different one way or another. It's really profound, and I feel completely honored to have been able to share, to bring Martin and Vera from Tamara to you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're hearing some visions from people writing in. What have we got going on here? We have a simple vision: green, able to talk, appreciate art and love. Kermit T. Frog. That I was going to say that sounds like a singles ad, but now I understand that you are a cartoon, so me and you can jam. I'm kind of funny too. What another one? Minimal interactions can bring meaning and equality and reduce turbulence and catastrophic failures from opto noise on Instagram. I like that tendency towards minimalism. I think that's speaking to some of what Vera was bringing about the ways that we express ourselves, and what Martin was saying about fierceness as well. What do we have? Sky Barks chat on YouTube. So many Indigenous cultures are so much more aware of their environment than those of us who grew up in the normal world. You can see that people's sense of awakening to what needs to come is just really growing at the moment. More and more people are talking about Indigenous wisdom, more and more people talking about the normal that's not normal anymore. And actually, I want to bring us to the principles and values of XR in this section that we have called Don't Get Left Behind. I don't want any of you to get left behind as the great evolution of the ever-living WTF is unfolding. And with all of these different visions, I'm wondering how this interacts with our, I'm just looking at it. We have one, oh yes, first principle and value. I've got them printed out. First principle and value. We have a shared vision of change, creating a world that is fit for generations to come. Okay, XR, we have a shared vision of change. Sounds to me like we've got a little bit of waiting to do before we are all sharing that vision of change. Not because it's not coming, but just because everything is changing so much right now. I've been thinking a lot about how, as we're harvesting these visions and harvesting these seeds, waiting for the time for them to come, to the fruit to bear, the field to get planted, waiting for that ecosystem to regenerate, the ecosystem of our own visionary cultures to regenerate. How do we hold ourselves in patience? How long can we bear it? When we talk about a shared vision, did any of us ever think that we would have to be patient before that shared vision showed itself to us? That's definitely something that I feel is alive across the UK XR organism at the moment. And I'd love to hear from you if you're tuning in from around the world. How is your XR organism working with all of the changes and the different visions that are unfolding right now? Another vision that's definitely been popping up this week is how we learn from ourselves. Number 5 is about us learning from having feedback and integrating all the different ways that we are moving through the changes. Of course we will change. Of course we have to learn from that. And actually, when things are changing so fast, how are we nurturing ourselves so that we can meet those changes? How are we making sure that we're listening to the future and responding to the future rather than just working with what's from the past? I'm going to leave you with those thoughts, saying that next week we've got Daniel Pinchbeck talking. He's like a proto-liberty utopian mage. And also Christabel from Advaya talking about their initiatives and how that's supporting that utopian world to come into being. I'm going to end on a prayer that I adore and send you off into the world and say thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Vision Seeds. This prayer is from a group called Beautiful Chorus, an all-female group called Beautiful Chorus. Just taking a breath and tuning in. Please prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, wise and true, with thanksgiving. I'll be a living sanctuary